Imagine standing in a world that thinks it's untouchable, where laughter spills through the streets, where the night air feels safe, where no one believes judgment could ever come. But tonight, everything changes. Before the sun rises, two ancient cities will be erased from the earth, not by accident, not by nature, but by a command issued from the very throne of God, a command carried by an angel whose footsteps shake the unseen realms. What could be so dark, so corrupted, so far gone that heaven itself decides the only cure is fire? And what does an executioner of God see? What does he feel as he descends into a city celebrating its last night alive? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a warning carved into history with flame and sulfur. This is the final night of Sodom and Gomorrah, told not from the ground, but from the blazing wings of the one sent to end it. And trust me, you've never heard it like this before. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we step into the most terrifying midnight the ancient world ever faced. Imagine standing beneath a silent night sky, the stars burning like distant watchmen as a gentle wind brushes past your face, and then, far beyond the horizon, a single point of light appears, small at first, almost insignificant, yet growing brighter, sharper, fiercer, until the darkness around you is swallowed by a blinding, molten brilliance that feels alive. It is not lightning, nor the birth of a storm, but the descent of an angel sent directly from the throne of God, carrying a decree that cannot be revoked. Before the sun rises, two ancient cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, will vanish from the earth. But only hours earlier, the evening had unfolded with deceptive normality as the sun dipped beneath the hills of the Jordan Valley, leaving streaks of gold and crimson glowing across the sky. Inside Sodom, the markets bustled, taverns spilled music and laughter into the streets, merchants bartered, children ran through the dust, and the wealthy lounged in comfort, their cups overflowing with wine and arrogance. The land was rich, the trade routes profitable, and the people convinced that their prosperity was proof of permanence, that nothing, not even God, could touch their carefully built paradise. Yet beneath that golden sunset lay decay, decay in their actions, decay in their relationships, decay in their blasphemous disregard for the very God who sustained their breath. And while they reveled in their illusions of safety, far away Abraham had just finished pleading with the Lord, "If 10 righteous are found there, will you spare the city?" The Lord answered yes, but the silence that followed hinted that the outcome had already been decided. In the courts of heaven, an angel had received his command, not to deliver a message, but to carry out judgment. 2 angels were sent ahead to walk the streets of Sodom, to witness its corruption firsthand, and once they reported back, the executioner would begin his work. This was no ordinary angel, but one of God's mighty ones, a being forged in the earliest dawn of creation, who had stood in the throne room as seas were separated from land, who had watched empires rise and crumble, and who now bore the solemn task of ensuring Sodom and Gomorrah would rise no more. As twilight deepened and the desert air cooled, Sodom's great gates loomed high, not as symbols of safety, but monuments of pride. Merchants shouted their final prices, guards leaned lazily against the walls, and a dry wind swept dust into the faces of travelers. Then, through the dimming light, 2 figures approached, simple in appearance, cloaked in dust like any other travelers, with no wings, no halos, nothing to reveal their divine nature. Yet the quiet authority in their stride made even the slouching guards instinctively straighten. They entered at twilight, and the city seemed to shift as they walked. Conversations faltered, eyes followed, whispers rose, not curious whispers, but predatory ones. At the city gate sat an older man, a stranger in spirit, though he lived within the city walls. Lot, Abraham's nephew, a man who had chosen the wealth of Sodom, yet still carried a flicker of righteousness that refused to die. When he saw the travelers, something stirred within him, an urgency he could not explain. He rose at once, bowed low, and insisted they come under his roof. The strangers declined at first, saying they would sleep in the square, but Lot knew what the night brought. His insistence was more than hospitality. It was a warning. Night in Sodom belonged to darkness deeper than absence of light. What happened next proved even Lot did not grasp the full corruption of the city. As the strangers entered his home, the city awoke like a disturbed hive. Word spread with terrifying speed. Foreigners had arrived. By nightfall, Lot's house was surrounded, not by neighbors, but by men of all ages driven by depravity so profound that even the youngest were poisoned by it. They hammered on the door, shouting demands no righteous mind could bear to hear. Fear and fury twisted their voices as they demanded Lot surrender the strangers. In that moment the two travelers rose from their seats and the veil over their true nature lifted. Their eyes burned, not with the anger of men, but with the judgment of heaven. They pulled Lot inside with a single swift motion, and at once darkness fell outside, not the darkness of a moonless night, but sudden, suffocating blindness. The mob clawed at walls, stumbled over one another, screaming in confusion as though drowning in a sea of shadows. Inside, the angels' voices changed. Gone were the gentle tones of guests accepting hospitality. Now their words carried the weight of eternity. "Do you have anyone else here? Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, anyone you care for in this city, take them and flee. We are about to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is great, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." Lot's heart pounded as the realization sank in. The words seemed unreal, yet the fire in the angel's eyes left no room for doubt. He rushed to warn his sons-in-law, pleading with them to escape, but they laughed, thinking he spoke in jest. They did not know the angel standing in Lot's home could level mountains if God commanded it. The night dragged toward dawn, and still Lot hesitated, torn between terror and disbelief. Finally, the angels seized him, his wife, and his two daughters, and dragged them through the dark streets toward the gate. "Flee for your lives," one commanded, his voice like a final trumpet before judgment. "Do not look back. Do not stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away." It was not only an order, it was mercy, extended even in the shadow of destruction. The plain stretched before them, still cloaked in fading darkness as they stumbled forward, the cold air biting their skin. Behind them the city lay silent, an unnatural silence, as though the earth itself held its breath. Lot did not see what happened next, but had he turned, he would have witnessed a sight no human eyes were meant to behold. The executioner, standing on the edge of the city, radiant like molten gold, wings of living fire unfurling across the sky. He raised his hand, and heaven answered. Fire did not simply fall, it erupted. The air ignited with divine flame, consuming streets, markets, gardens, and homes in a storm of sulfur and fire. Sodom's laughter vanished, replaced by a chorus of screams swallowed by the inferno. And as Lot fled, each step he took brought the angel closer to completing the judgment that would echo through history as a warning etched in ash. A reminder that God is patient, but his patience is not endless. Lot and his daughters stumbled forward through the dim light of early dawn, the cold morning air cutting across their faces as if urging them not to slow. Behind them lay a silence so heavy it felt unnatural, like creation itself was waiting for something to break. Then it happened, a sound like the tearing of the heavens, a roar that poured downward with the weight of thunder. Lot turned his head only a fraction, but a fraction was enough. At the edge of the dying city stood a figure tall and unmoving, glowing like molten gold, catching the first hint of sunrise. Wings of living fire stretched out behind him, wings so vast they seemed to drink the stars from the sky. His face defied human description, beautiful and terrible at once, marked by the full authority of the God who had sent him. When he raised his arm, heaven answered. Fire did not simply fall. It burst forth, erupting as though the very air had become flame. Streets, marketplaces, gardens, and homes were swallowed whole in waves of burning judgment. The laughter of Sodom vanished instantly, replaced by the cries of a city meeting its end, yet the angel did not waver. Every strike of fire was precise, every surge of destruction measured. Soon, Gomorrah, Sodom's sister in sin, was consumed as well. Stone crumbled into ash, the earth split open and spat glowing embers, and the sky flushed a deep, blood-red hue as a pillar of fire rose toward the clouds. Lot's daughters cried out to him to keep running, but not every heart remained fixed forward. Behind them, Lot's wife slowed. Perhaps she heard the echoes of her life disappearing. Perhaps she simply could not imagine her world ending in one night. She turned, just once, and in an instant the same divine power that scorched the cities hardened her into a pillar of salt, frozen in the posture of longing for a place that no longer existed. Lot could not look back, but he felt the weight of the moment press into him like a stone. By sunrise the cities were gone. Nothing remained but a wasteland of grey ash and rising smoke. Amid the ruins, the angel stood alone. His flaming wings folded slowly against his back as the last fires dimmed. His gaze was not on what had perished, but on the justice that had been fulfilled. There was no cruelty in him, no satisfaction, only obedience, steady and unshakable. The wind swept across the plain, carrying the bitter smell of sulphur, drifting over cracked ground where life once thrived. Lot and his daughters reached a distant ridge and stopped. They said nothing. How do you speak when everything you once knew has vanished? Some griefs are too deep for words. Far behind them, unseen by human eyes, the angel remained among the ashes. The sword of fire in his hand flickered and cooled as the final sparks died out. He looked once toward the mountains where the survivors fled, then toward the sky that had borne the fire of God. His face held no triumph, only the calm certainty that the will of the Lord had been carried out. This was never his choice. It was his duty. And through that duty, the land itself was reshaped. From that day forward, Sodom and Gomorrah were no longer just cities. They became a warning etched into the earth and into human memory, whispering across generations. God is patient, but his patience is not endless. Somewhere in the unseen realms, the angel who executed that judgment still stands ready, waiting for the next moment heaven calls upon him. That night was not only an act of wrath, it was an act of justice from a God who had witnessed enough cruelty, enough corruption, enough brokenness, and chose to bring it to an end. And it was the story of an angel, fierce and faithful, who carried out that end without hesitation. When you revisit this account, do not see only fire. See the mercy that offered escape, the warnings given before the flames, and the God who always calls his people to turn before judgment falls.